Hello YouTube, it is me, Rouse Kilroy, your favorite character from the smash hit game Risk of Rain 2, here to talk to you today about another new item from the Seekers of the Storm DLC. And oh man, can Gearbox stop with the bangers, please? The answer to that is yes, they can, because I would call this item Delicate Watch 2.0, but in reality it's probably Delicate Watch 0.5. It's not nearly as good. I'm sorry to say, Gearbox, this, in my opinion, is another stinker of an item. It's not as bad as some of the others that are added, believe me. It does have a genuine use case. However, it is not a exceedingly consistent use case, and it is another item added to this DLC, marred by Gearbug's unique coding standards. And why would you say that? Well, in case you hadn't seen my previous video on this item, it was just a little quick overview of a glitch I found. For whatever reason, the Bolstering Lantern, which you can see the description here, when below 50% health, receive a damage increase of 20%. This item has a bug when it is inherited by enemies, whether in the void field or using the artifact that gives enemies items. For whatever reason, this item has a check on it in its code where it checks to make sure that the person who has the item is on the player's team before it applies this buff, which means that when given to enemies, this item does not help them at all, which is kind of funny and is beneficial to you, the player, but it does kind of take out that inheritance mechanic entirely, especially from like bosses like Mithrix and stuff. So that's just a baseline thing, that doesn't really matter. However, as you will learn throughout this video, this item has very odd interactions with the HP system of Risk of Rain 2. Now what does that mean, you may ask? So, if you look at an item like the Delicate Watch, it has a bar on your HP added whenever you pick up the item that shows that if you go below 20% HP, the Delicate Watch will break, and it shows on your HP bar what that 20% HP threshold is. And that's a very useful visual aid because your HP bar can change a lot from, say, picking up personal shield generators, picking up Transcendence, getting Shaped Glass, getting hit on Eclipse 8, all actions that can modify the amount of health you have as a character. And there are interactions with Shaped Glass that are programmed to get rid of some, say, cheeses for the item. Sorry, not Shaped Glass. With Delicate Watch, my dyslexia pops up again. But when you have the Delicate Watch with, say, Transcendence, it will still break upon losing 80% of your shield, even though your HP is permanently stuck at 1. So the developers of Risk of Rain 2 did a good job in adjusting the Delicate Watch and other items like it, like the Power Elixir, to modify themselves and their activate points with your HP. However, the Bolstering Lantern does not act in the same way as those items when it comes to the HP modification. I will show you what I mean in a footage very soon, but in terms of an overview of this item, I'd say you can pick it up, and there are cases where you will be under 50% HP that it will find use. However, unless you want to stay close to death at all times, this item is likely only going to get use in dire situations. So it might be a nice clutch damage bonus in the last moments of a boss fight, but for most of your run, you are not going to see the buff from this item activate. Now, let's get into how this item can be used to decent effect and how this item interacts with your health bar. Okay, baseline easiest thing to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is you need to get your HP below 50%. Shocking news, I know. But you can always do that by just letting enemies wail on you for a sec. However, I'm not really a fan of that because not only is it just inconsistent, you never know the exact amount of damage you're going to be taking in an encounter, but also if you wait around too long, you can find yourself getting overwhelmed very quickly, especially as the game progresses. So, I'm going to try to pick up a white item here. Here we go. Bolstering Lantern might be something. And I'll just show you the basic effect here. That was 12 damage. Boom. Hit me again, so I'm slightly under half. There you go, 13. Now, that buff is different just because of the weirdness in rounding in this game. That only gave a 1 point boost because 20%. Actually, no, I don't know why that gave so little of a buff, actually. Hold on. Let me do some calculations here. 13, 16. Okay, that's confusing. I think I'm just experiencing damage drop off with the M1, so I'm going to forget all this. Consistent way of seeing damage though is this. 13 damage on every hit of the R there. And once that gets back, I will show you the buffed damage. 17, there you go. That is closer to the 20% accurate damage buff. Excuse me for my bad choice of test case, because M1 on the commando has a lot of damage drop off, so realistically it shouldn't be used for a damage comparison in most cases. The R, however, I believe does not have that drop off. Yeah, it's pretty consistent. So you see, you get the damage buff, and you get an actual buff marker on your bar when you have the Bolstering Lantern active. So hey, that's one of the buffs you could try to use for your Growth Nectar as well. But like I said before, you could run around and just let enemies hit you to get in the range, but that is dangerous and can get out of hand really fast. So the best way to activate and use this item is to find a Shrine of Blood on the stage and make use of it. Sure, you put yourself in a dangerous space for a while, but you give yourself more damage output, and that lets you stay alive better because you'll be killing things faster and they will be killing you slower. Now, the other thing I want to go over for the Bolstering Lantern, because I'm not just going to spend 20 minutes showing you how you can get 20% more damage. I think that's pretty obvious at this point. The other best part of this item is the items that it synergizes with. Now, I say items. Realistically, I think there's one item that's a very good synergy with the Bolstering Lantern, and that is the Genesis Loop. And the reason I say that is because Genesis Loop also activates on low HP, so you can be guaranteed that whenever the Genesis Loop does activate, and it gives you the massive burst of damage, you will be getting a 20% bonus to the already humongous damage of that item. And that item recharges and can just be reactivated every time you get down to below 25% HP for another stack of 20% boosted damage. And Bolstering Lantern works exactly like the Dalka Watch, so every single stack of Bolstering Lantern you get increases your damage by 20% additively. So 1 is 10, or sorry, words. 1 is 20%, 3 is 60%, 5 is 100%. So there is benefit to stacking it if you are trying to make use of it consistently. However, consistency is the main thing to talk about with this item. Because you are not going to be staying under half health on purpose most of the time, I'm trying to do it right now just to show off the damage buff from the item. However, like I said, most of the time you do not want to be trying to stay under half health. And the second you start getting any healing item on any character you're playing, then you start losing control. I am so happy I got a yellow item. This is going to exactly show off my point of the Genesis Loop. So, Genesis Loop, in case you didn't know, fires an electric nova at low health, and that's 25% HP or lower. You can see the little bar just popped up to show it. And because it goes alongside with the Bolstering Lantern, boom, you get a massive chunk of damage, even more so than you would with just the Genesis Loop on its own. So, amazingly, I've gotten the 2 perfect items for this run. I know it's not that amazing because I'm using command, but the fact that I got a yellow item instantly from the boss is pretty impressive. And I got a blue portal even though I didn't activate anything. Maybe I should have just turned this into a full run. But Blue Portal is actually perfect because it will allow me to show the other thing I was talking about earlier. As I showed with my pictures earlier and my descriptions, Risk of Rain 2 has a way of adjusting your HP thresholds once you start picking up items that modify your HP, like the Shaped Glass or like Transcendence. And as you can see in the bottom left corner of my screen, that little bar right now is for Genesis Loop, but would otherwise be there for items like the Power Elixir or the Delicate Watch. And that bar would be modified based on picking up an item like the Transcendence. Or it won't, sorry, again, words. It wouldn't be modified by picking up the Transcendence. It would be modified by something like the Shaped Glass. So you might think to yourself that because the game understands how to modify the HP and activation thresholds for items like the Delicate Watch and the Genesis Loop, that it would also do so for the Bolstering Lantern. However, it does not do that for the Bolstering Lantern. Rather strangely, once you pick up an item once you pick up a Transcendence, from what I've seen, the Bolstering Lantern becomes entirely useless. It has no use case anymore, and I will show you what I mean by that. I will take some hits, although taking a hit from enemies who can activate Collapse maybe isn't the best idea. I'll just run around in the Void Fog to get below half HP. Now what you'd expect is getting under half HP would start to give you the buff from the Bolstering Lantern. However, you can see I am far under half HP now, and I get no such buff. I could keep going in here until I activate the Genesis Loop, and that will activate as it's supposed to, but not the Bolstering Lantern buff. That will not activate ever again as long as my HP is fully at shield. And now, this is not the only way that this works. This item works seemingly correctly with Shaped Glass, because when you pick up Shaped Glass, as long as your HP is still normal and not all shields, your HP will be modified so that reaching half of the Shaped Glass HP is what will activate the Bolstering Lantern. I have seen that in my testing before. So they understood to change the health threshold for Shaped Glass and other aspects that give you Curse, like the Eclipse 8 debuff. However, they did not make it activate when you have all shields, when you have Transcendence. And I don't really understand why. I think it's kind of just a programming quirk with Gearbox that they forgot about that use case. I can't imagine it would be intentional, given that Risk of Rain 2 has already established with items like the Genesis Loop that activate at low HP, that they will activate at the proper HP threshold when your shield is replacing your health. So I really just think this is another instance of Gearbox messing up on trying to implement new items with probably new language in their code that doesn't correspond with items that have already been added to this game. So I hope this is something that will be addressed in the patch, because if this does get addressed, I believe that Transcendence would be one of the better items to synergize with Bolstering Lantern, sorry. Because once you get down below half HP normally, if you have healing items, or even if you don't, your natural regen will eventually take you above, and your shield regen will also take you above. However, you will have a full 7 seconds of uninterrupted buffed damage, because once your HP is all shield, it takes 7 seconds of getting no damage applied to you before it starts recharging. So once you get down to low HP with Transcendence, you will have a guaranteed amount of time for your buffs from low HP to activate, which is a good thing. It would be a good thing if that worked that way. So, hey, make a long story short, do not pick up Transcendence with the Bolstering Lantern. You can pick up Shaped Glass, although you will have to be putting yourself at a much greater risk, because then you will need to be at 25% HP or less to get a buff. You should definitely pick up the Genesis Loop with the Bolstering Lantern. I believe that is the best combination of items you will have with the Bolstering Lantern. I briefly looked at the unstable transmitter as well, but that item is already very dangerous on its own and is probably not worth trying to pick up most of the time. So I wouldn't recommend pairing that with the Bolstering Lantern, even though there is an obvious use case with it, as it is another low health activating item. So hey, that's all I got to say about this item. It's kind of all right in some scenarios. Cool interactions with some items like Genesis Loop. No interactions with items like Transcendence, even though there should be. Gearbox, bugs, please address them. And hey, to you listening out there, thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.